Welcome to episode 70 in our series on duties of the heart by Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda, and we're up to chapter 3 of the eighth gate. The eighth gate is the gate of self-accounting, and in this chapter, number 3, it's a very long chapter and it may take a few episodes, but it's well worth it. Basically, what Rabbi Bahya does is he gives us 30 examples of the way we can self-account, and it'll be self-explanatory, and he kind of hits it from all angles. So let's begin. In how many ways should a person hold himself to an accounting before God? I say that there are a multitude of ways in which to make such an accounting. Of these I will point out 30. They can clarify to a person what he owes God, if he will bring them to mind and undertake to reflect on them and remember them always. So the first one he describes is God's grace in just the very existence of a person. So he begins, number 1, when a person contemplates his own existence and reflects on how he first came into being and was brought from non-existence into existence, from nothing into a reality, not because of any prior merit, but only by God's grace, goodness and generosity, when he recognizes that his state is more distinguished, his degree more elevated, his form nobler than those of an animal, plant or inanimate objects, he will then undertake to thank his Creator, may he be exalted. Let him draw a close analogy. Let him imagine that when he was a nursing infant, his mother abandoned him on the street. A man passing by saw him and, pitying him, took him into his home. He cared for him and raised him until he reached maturity in body and in mind. How great would be his obligation to hasten to do this man's will, honor his command, and refrain from what he forbids. How deeply indebted he would be to this man. So too, as the Creator had sheltered him and provided him with all his needs, he should follow his service and accept his commandments. Moshe Rabbeinu took up this theme when he admonished the nation, and he quotes from Devarim 32 verse 6. Is this how you repay God, you foolish and unwise people? Is he not your Father who created you? He made you and established you. He provided for them in a barren land, in an empty, howling wasteland. He sheltered and enlightened them. He protected them as the apple of his eye. Like an eagle that flutters over its young, he spread his wings and took them up, carrying them on his wings. This is from Devarim, chapter 32. Yecheskel elaborated on this, saying, you were cast out into the open field in your own filth on the day of your birth. Then I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, and so on to the end of the passage. The second example of self-accounting that one should bring upon himself is God's grace in the wonders of his physical body. We take this for granted, and Rabbi Bahya expertly describes, the various functions, that we should appreciate them, that everything is working in tandem. The tens of thousands of processes every second that are working beautifully together. We sometimes take it for granted that if any one of these would be out of kilter, terrible things would happen to us. So anyway, number 2, one should make an accounting with himself of the extraordinary favours God has bestowed upon him in the composition of his body, in the perfection of his form and essence, in the structure of his limbs, in having been brought forth from his mother's womb by his power, in the provision before and after birth of his nourishment, ideally suited to him and in perfect proportion to his needs, all by God's grace upon him. And he should reflect on the following. If he had lacked from birth eyes, hands or legs, and the human being was able to provide him with these so that his body would be whole and complete, how grateful he would be to this person. How loyally would he heed his command and devotedly serve him. Accordingly, he should be loyal to his Creator, may he be exalted, who provided for his body's well-being and completed all his limbs in perfect order and harmony. As it says from Job 10, remember now, you formed me like clay, and you returned me to the dust. Have you not poured me out like milk and curdled me like cheese? With skin and flesh you have clothed me, with bones and sinews you have sheltered me. And also from Psalms chapter 139, you created my inward parts, you knit me together in my mother's womb. And also from Psalms 22, you brought me forth from the womb, you made me secure at my mother's breast. So I think every one of us, whenever we are even slightly ill, even if we have a toothache or something minor going on with our bodies, we suddenly appreciate what it's like just to be in a perfect equilibrium, our state of health, to be in without any deficiencies or problems. And once we return to health, we really appreciate our health. But we should be like this from the minute we wake up every day, appreciating our bodies, the functionality of our limbs, and the quality of our senses, sight, smell, our hearing. All of these things we take for granted, but we have every opportunity to be anything we want through the physical means of our body, and very rarely do they actually go out of kilter, so we should appreciate that. The third example of a type of self-accounting is the fact that God graces us with intelligence and noble intellectual qualities. So he continues, number 3, one should make a reckoning of and contemplate the great favour God has bestowed upon him in granting him intelligence and insight, together with many precious and noble qualities, which gives him superiority over non-rational living creatures, as it is written in Job 35, who has taught us more than the beasts of the earth and made us wiser than the birds of the heaven. And he should consider this: if he had been bereft of intelligence and insight, and the fellow man then supplied him with these faculties, and he realized the superiority of his present condition over his former state, he would all his life and the full measure of his days be sufficient for the continuous thanks and praise due this man for what he had done? How much greater is the duty of gratitude to the Creator, may he be exalted, whose favours to us are endless, and whose graces upon us are without bound, as it is written. And he quotes from Psalms chapter 40, manifold are the acts you have performed, Hashem, my God. Your wondrous deeds and thoughts towards us, I declare and pronounce, none can compare with you. Your wonders are too great to recount. And now he's going to move on to number 4, which is God's grace in giving us the Torah. So we've moved from the physical through to the intellectual, and now we're going to talk about the Torah, the great gift that Hashem gives us, a structure to live by, and a means of protection for ourselves, and a way of cleaving to God. So number 4, one should make a reckoning with himself of God's extraordinary favour to him in rousing him to his life source in both worlds through a noble, faithful Torah, given to remove his blindness, wipe out his ignorance, enlighten his eyes, and draw him close to God's will. A Torah that informs him with a true conception of his Creator and of his duty towards him. By fulfilling this duty, his happiness in both worlds may be complete, as it is written also in Tehillim chapter 19. God's Torah is perfect, restoring the soul. God's testimony is sure, making wise the simple. God's precepts are just, rejoicing the heart. God's commandment is pure, enlightening the eyes. He should contemplate the following. If, while aware of the Torah's eminence, he was unable to have any part in it, and then he met someone who helped him attain it, would his efforts to properly thank and praise this individual or his power to do so ever be sufficient? How much more, then, is this the case in regard to the Creator, who awakens to him, gives him the capacity to understand it, and helps him with it? The very least of what we owe him in the way of gratitude is to rush to adhere to his Torah and to hasten to accept his commands and prohibitions, as it is written also in Tehillim, chapter 119, I hasten and do not delay to observe your commandments. And also Tehillim, how I love your Torah, it is my meditation all day long. And finally, a final quote from 119 Tehillim: "How sweet is your words to my palate." So Rabbi Bachya, again, for the fourth time, is giving us examples, and then he's emphasizing that were we not born, for example, when he mentioned about the limbs, were we not born with limbs, with arms, or we were born but we didn't have arms, and then we were given arms, how grateful we should be. The same he talks about the intellect, the same he talks about the Torah. Just reflect on, if you were born without these things and someone gave it to you, how grateful would you be? And then realize you have been given these gifts. So one should have a sense of gratitude for all these things, and he gives a good examples. And number 5, he continues, one should make a personal accounting of his delay in coming to understand God's Torah, and of his contentness with not grasping its content. So Rabbi Bahya here is telling us it's not enough that God gave us the Torah, that we should appreciate it. We should make a self-analysis why we haven't delved into its depths and sought to understand it and toiled to understand it. He's saying, you've been given the Torah, why have you not studied it? Or, let's continue. He continues, he would not act in this way in regard to a book that came to him from a human king, in the event that he was not sure of its meaning. For example, because of incomprehensible handwriting or diction, the depth, subtlety, or complexity of its material, or its rhetorical style. Rather, he would focus his mind and concentrate all his thoughts in order to understand its meaning, and he would be greatly distressed until he understood its intention. Now, if he would go to such lengths to understand the book of a human being, weak and mortal like himself, how much greater is it his obligation to go far beyond this, or to understand the book of his God, which is the source of his life, as it says in Devarim, chapter 30, for it is the source of your life and long endurance. And he continues, how could you permit yourself, my brother, to neglect it, and be content with what is easily understood and readily apparent, whilst disregarding the rest? Do you realize how faulty and disreputable your behavior has been in this regard? Does it not resemble the conduct of one of whom it is said, and he quotes from Daniel chapter 5, you praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze and iron, of wood and stone, who do not see or hear or know anything, but the God in whose hands are your soul and all your ways you did not glorify. So Rabbi Bahya is demanding that not only do we accept the Torah and appreciate the Torah, but we have to delve into it. We know that the Torah is a multi-layered composition, and it is it can be understood on many different levels. So according to our madrega, according to our level, according to each level that we attain as a human being, we must delve to the corresponding level of the Torah's meaning throughout our life. We should not satisfy ourselves by saying we studied in yeshiva, we don't really need to delve in it again, or how much revision do we need? We need at each stage of our life the Torah becomes revised for us, and we have to again delve into it and discover its new meanings that relate to our present state of ascension, of the soul's ascension. And I think we're going to leave it there for today. We're up to number 6. But we should perhaps reflect on some of these, the first 5. Fascinating, and I look forward to continuing this list of 30 types of self-accounting that Rabbi Bachya has included in this gate. So we'll see you next episode.